Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to part 2 of my tutorial for the authentication and admin coding assignment. In part 2, we we build the basic login and logout functionality for our course info app. And this work corresponds roughly to chapter 19 in the Pinkham book. But I have to be honest with you, I have not really modeled our solution after the code that's in the Pinkham book because his approach is really too complicated for us. Some of that has to do with him just being a complicator. And some of that has to do with the fact that his application is, it's a little more complex than ours. If you think about our Easy University application, there really are going to be very few things that one can do if one is not logged in. In fact, I could make the argument that you shouldn't be able to do anything at all. So if you're not logged in, you shouldn't really even see the application. We're going to be a little bit short of that. Here's what we're going to say. We're going to say if you are not logged into the application and you go to it, you're going to be asked to log in, except for if you want to look at the About page. Okay, this is a demonstration application, so we'll let people see the About page, but really everything else is going to require a login. Okay? Because of that, kind of all the thoughts about who's logged in when and do they want to log in now and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot more simple. Basically, if you're in the application, you're logged in. And you can use the application or you can choose to log out, in which case you're out of the application. Okay, so we have simpler rules and we're going to take a simpler approach. The approach that I've taken is really based upon a really nice tutorial, and I'm going to bring up the tutorial here, by Vitor Freitas. And it's on a site that has some good Django stuff called Simple is Better Than Complex. And this may be Vitor's own site. I've seen this before. But it's a tutorial in how to use Django's built-in login system. And it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so this is the approach that we're going to be taking. If you want to see the entire URL, let me copy that and show you that. Okay, so we just take the URL for this and we'll paste it into this guy, text editor, where we can see it a little better. Okay. All right, so here's where the approach actually has come from. There's a little bit of code that I've taken from Pinkham chapter 19, but for the most part, this is a much more direct approach than the approach from the chapter 19 in the Pinkham book. All right, let's stop talking about it and do it. All right, so what's the first thing that we're going to do? We're going to create a template for a login page. Okay, and I just want to say here that, like the approach that's taken in the login, the Pinkham book in chapter 19, we are going to borrow the functionality for login and logout that's part of the admin app. But we're going to brand the pages ourselves, and we're going to have the behavior appear to be in our app. Okay, it's going to look like our app has login and logout functionality, and in fact it does because we're configuring the use of those parts of the admin app. Okay, so let's go do that. So we're going to need a form, a login form. Okay, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy mine out of my already baked version, and I'm going to say I want a new HTML file, and I just want to call it login, right? And let's see what the code is going to be here. Make it a little bigger so it makes it easier for you to read. Okay, so we are extending the base.html template that we're doing with everything else. So we're going to have the same shell around this. The title is going to be login, the page title. We're going to have within the content, we're going to have in an H2 that says login. Okay, and then we're going to have a form. Okay, and we're going to do the form as P. We're going to have the cross site request forgery token like we should. We have a submit button, etc. So this is a pretty simple form. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do. All right, well, when we think back to how we normally do things, well, what do we have? We have a URL pattern, we have a view, we have a template. Okay, so we have our template. Okay, we're going to be borrowing the view from the admin app. Okay, so what we need is a proper URL pattern. So let's go get a look at our URL pattern. Okay, so the URL pattern is going to be it's going to be up in the urls.py that's for our whole overall project, and we call that Easy University. So let's look at that. And right now, here's what we have. We have the redirect, which is going to give us our redirect to the section list. We have our about. We have our admin, which can get us to the admin app proper, not borrowed functionality from the admin app, but the real admin app. And then we have the include for the URLs configuration that's under the course info app. So let's add here, before we get to admin, let's add our code for login. Okay, so let's just take a look at this and see what it does. Okay, so here's our login. Okay, and you may say, oh well, gee, that doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because we don't have all of our imports. So let's do a proper import up here, and then I'll talk my way through it for you. Okay, so first of all, we need a view that we're borrowing from the authorization app. So we say from Django contrib auth, import views as auth views. Okay, so then we're able to get all the views in from auth, and that's going to include the one that we're going to use here, which is called login. So if we get the URL string login slash, we're going to send it to the view login within the views that are part of the auth app. Okay, we're going to point it in a pretty effective way here to the template that we want. Unless we take the approach here of passing the dictionary to tell it where to get the template from, it's going to look in a standard spot that we don't want it to look for it there. And then we need to give it a name, and so we're going to call this the login URL pattern. Okay, so let's see how that's going to work. All right, so now I think we're ready to test. So we have the URL configured. We have the view because we're borrowing it, and we have a template because we've added a template. So let's crank up the tester, crank up the server, and run it here. And let's see what we're going to get. Okay. So we don't have any links for logging in and logging out yet. So we're going to have to go up and actually type in the URL. So what do we get if we type in login? Well, we get a login page, but with our branding and our whole shell around it. Okay. So where is it going to go? Well, let's just look at our code and see where our code says to go. Okay, in our login, it says, one second here, I don't want to mislead you. I'm not taking you down the wrong path today. One more change. I was wondering, how does it know where to go once it's logged in? Well, again, the default behavior is that it goes to some accounts profile page, which, number one, we don't have, and two, that's not the behavior that we want. We just want it to go to the default view. So how do we control that? Well, we control that in settings.py. Okay, and it turns out that there is a variable that we can add, and we can say, where do we want to go after a login? And that variable is called login redirect URL. Okay, and then we just give it the name of a URL pattern that we want to go to. Okay, so where do we want to go? Well, our default is course info section list URL pattern. So that's where we're going. All right, so that's where we want to go. Now we're ready to test. Just making sure that's saved. Let's go back up here, and now we're in. So let's now say we want to log in. Let's test it now. Okay, so we give it a bad user, and it says it wants a bad password too. So it didn't like the username and password. So we should all have a test user that we set up earlier, and it should all have the password SOS secret, and let's do that. All right, and now we should be logged in. And where did we go? Section list. Pretty darn cool. Now, how can we tell if we're logged in? Well, we really can't. Okay. What we're going to do in a minute or two or five is we're going to go and we're going to change our base.html to display some content that's going to show whether or not we're logged in. Okay. But for right now, we're just either logged in or we're not. All right. And we know that we're logged in. Okay. Now, we're not able to log out because we haven't added that functionality yet. So what do we have to add? Well, again, we're going to borrow our view from the Auth app. Okay, so we're going to need a URL pattern. So we have a URL pattern for login. Let's add one for logout. Okay. So I'm going to copy mine from the already baked version, and then we're going to talk it through. Okay. So again, one of the nice things is to know that the we tell the server that we want to log in or log out just by sending it the URL, a very simple one that says either login or log out. Okay. We're going to borrow the view from the auth application called logout. Okay. We're going to say that the name of this URL pattern is logout URL pattern. And we're going to use a slightly different form with logout. Instead of telling it the name of the page we want it to render, okay, we don't want to I mean, in some applications, you'll get a page and say, well, you've logged out of our application and we really love you. Okay, well, not ours. As soon as you log out, where do you want to be? Well, you want to be on the login page. So we're going to use this option to say what the next page is after a successful log out. And the next page is we just want to go to log in. So this is the URL path that's going to take us to the login page. Okay, so let's see. We have a URL configuration. We have a view because we're borrowing one. We're borrowing this logout view. Do we need a template? No, because we're not really going to render a page. We're going to send it to the next page, which is the login page, and we've got all the code for that already. So that's all we need. So again, I'm going to make sure this code is saved with my Command S on the Mac. That would be Control S on Windows. And let's go back. And now let's assume that we're logged in. We can just type the logout. And where do we go? We go to the login page. Okay, so this is going to be the state of our system. Our design is going to be this. When we finally get our do all of the parts of our tutorial for this coding assignment, we're going to protect instructors. You're not going to be able to go there if you're not logged in, or sections, or courses, or semesters, or students. The only thing you're going to be able to do if you're not logged in is see the About page. That's it. Okay? Anything else is going to cause you to need to log in. Okay. Now, how are we going to know whether or not we're logged in? Okay. Well, we really need to add a row to our page, to our base.html page. and we add a row that we call the status row, and we just put it on top. So let's go and take a look at that. So let's find our base.html file and open it up. And you'll see that the top row within the body is we have this div called the container, which is holding all the content. And then we have this, we have the header, we say is a class equal row. And we want to add code before this that's a status row. So where did I get the code? Well, I'm not above borrowing. I borrowed it from our friend Mr. Pinkham, but I've changed it a little bit. Okay, so let me take my status row out of my already baked version. Okay, so I'm just going to put it up here. All right. And let's see how that looks. And okay, it's a div classical status row. Then we've got the styling hooks. Here's the key that we have here. We can check in the code tags. We can say if user is authenticated, well, then we're going to give them a logout link. Else, we're going to give them a login link. Now, what you're going to find is that the login link, when we finally get done, isn't really going to be all that useful because to be on any of these other pages, well, let me say this. The only page that you're going to be able to be on and not logged in, and it's not a login page, is going to be the About page. Other than that, you're not going to be able to get there if you're not logged in. Okay, so let's just see what happens we do that. Let's do a save on that. And let's go back and test it. And here we go. So we see that we have a link to log in. So why don't we log in? Okay, so test user and give it our SOAS secret password. Okay, and then when we're logged in, what happens is if we're logged in, we show the logout link. If we're not logged in, we show the login link. So how does that look? Well, if we click on logout, we go to logout. Now let's just take a look at that code again. Where did we go? Well, we just have we have these links, right? And they say, in one case it says log out, and we just say we want a URL for the logout URL pattern. That's all we need. Or in the alternative, we have a login link, and we want the URL for the login URL pattern. And very simply, when we do that, we get these opportunities. Now, again, what's going to happen is that we're going to configure this such that you could be on the About page and see a login link. All right, because we're going to allow them to get there without being logged in. We're not going to allow them to get to any of these other pages without being logged in. More typically, where they'll be is here. They'll be on the login page. There'll be a link that says you can go to the login page, but that doesn't hurt. Okay, because right here. All right, and then again, as soon as you get logged in, test user SOAS secret. As soon as you get logged in, you get a logout link. Pretty cool, huh? I like it. So that's all we have for this part. We're going to go in and configure our system. As of right now, if we ask to go to any of these parts of the application, it doesn't care whether we're logged in or not. Okay, well, that's not good. So we need to configure that. We're going to be able to do that in the next part. So until then, I'm going to say bye. Bye-bye.